All right. Well, thanks again for showing up. It's really great to see everyone. How to stop living in survival mode and thrive. So, I'm Ruth Chadwick, for those of you who don't know me. I've been practicing in New York City as a coach and psychotherapist for about 12 years now. And this particular topic has just been a huge interest of mine because of my own personal experience, for one, and also just I'm a big observer of culture and American culture and what's going on for people and what's coming up for my clients and that sort of thing. And so work culture, hustle culture, burnout culture, grind culture, all these things, sort of the epidemic of workaholism. And a part of that is this kind of survival mode that a lot of people find themselves in. And so I started, as a part of my work and also on my personal journey, started looking into this specifically. Like why are we all in survival mode, or why are so many of us in survival mode, feeling scattered, overwhelmed, just the effects of chronic stress all the time? Is this something that we have any control over, right? Because there are all of these societal factors, and depending on where you work, there might be really high demands put on you on a day-to-day basis, pressures. Not to mention if you're raising kids or whatever happens to be going on for you outside of work, all of that can just start to really take a toll. Now, I specifically tend to focus in on the work culture because I think, sometimes it feels like, well, we don't have a choice in that. But I started to try to look at, well, where do we have choice, or where do we have ways that we can change the way we operate? And if we show up to work differently, we can show up in our lives differently too. Like if we're not just completely sapped and drained all the time. So that's kind of, where I'm coming from. I spent I'd say most of my adult life until a few years ago, living in some version of survival mode, and it was not fun. And so I'm here to share with you what I've learned, things that I've picked up, tools, new perspectives, and things that have really, really helped me, because they've really shifted my life in some pretty amazing ways. And so that's what this is about. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of talk about some myths and misunderstandings that I think add to our experience of living in survival mode. And the first one is this: it's part of our dominant narrative, meaning the dominant narrative in our culture of American culture specifically, but other countries as well. But I think, what I'm speaking to specifically is American culture. And that is the thread of this narrative, which is scarcity. Now, scarcity shows up in a lot of different ways in our culture. It's actually at the core of a lot of capitalistic theory, I would say. The whole idea being that there's scarcity in the world, and therefore that creates competition for finite resources, which of course gets everybody agitated. Well, if there's competition and there's finite resources, we all need to be stressed out, right? We all need to rush and race to get the stuff, whatever it is: money, resources, food, shelter. So I mean, but scarcity it shows up in many different insidious ways. It shows up in feeling like no matter how much I'm doing, it's not enough, right? And that's how a lot of people feel. It's like, I'm never doing enough. Like I can never do enough. So that's one way that it shows up in people's daily lives. It also shows up in, I never feel like I have enough. Like I never have enough money, or I never have enough time. But specifically, if we're talking about, money, well, that's, how it's related to work. We need money to survive, right? And we need to have a job to survive, to make money. It all kind of gets tied up in this. So, again, the way, and it's, and of course the scarcity it's everywhere, right? It's in the news. Like if you turn on CNN right now, what are they talking about? Inflation, economic downturn, recession, uh, energy crisis, scarcity, 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 scarcity. So it's hard to live not in scarcity when it's kind of you're being bombarded by scarcity messages all the time. So, and the other thing about that is that it leaves us feeling like at the end of the day, like we're not enough. That's what ends up happening is we feel inadequate. And that shows up in the workplace in ways like in like survival mode. I'm sorry, and what's the word I'm looking for? Imposter syndrome, where people are kind of afraid that they're going to be found out. And, once they find out that I'm not as good as they think I am, that I'm out of there. So there are all these ways that these kinds of messages are sort of doing a number on us, sometimes without knowing it, because it's so like embedded in the cultural narrative, again, in the way that capitalism operates. It's social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. It's a race, it's a rat race. We're all in a race together. So how could that not make you feel stressed out? Like if you feel like your very survival is on the line every day. And the thing about the scarcity mentality is, unfortunately, the scarcity mentality itself has resulted in things like hoarding, right? Inequity in our society. The things that actually, if we lived in a different mindset where we believed there was enough for everyone, no one would need to hoard or control or, so I can't solve that today on this call, but what I can do is give you some different ways of thinking about it. So again, if we all believe we have to hustle and scramble to get by, and if we all are living that way, and we also believe that, well, and we definitely have to hustle if we want to be successful, right? So it's one thing if you have to hustle just to get by. It's another thing, well, if you want to be successful, then you better be working, you better be burning the candle at both ends, right? That's a given. So what if, my question is, what if this is not the case, right? What if we have just been carrying these stories within us, like living from this place for such a long time that we really we've forgotten, or we don't realize that we do have enough and that we are enough, and that scarcity is a state of mind. It's not reality. It's not the truth. And in fact, all we kind of have to do is start looking in this direction of, I would say, words I would use would be enough. I would even say plenty. If you look at your life right now, I'd say right here, right now, if you're not thinking about bills you have to pay and debt you may have or anything like that, right here in this moment, I would say you have enough, right? You're sitting here, we're having this conversation. You probably you have shelter, you have food, you have clothing, you have all of those things. And so feeling like we have enough, and even feeling like we have plenty, because if you go further into that conversation and you really start to look even more into your life, like what are the resources that I really have? Who are the people that would show up for me if I needed them to? If things got bad, who are the people I could call, or what are the other options I would have, or, that sort of thing. If you really take that conversation as far as you can take it, you'll end up with plenty. You'll end up with more than enough, whether it is money or resources or friends or family or love, which is what a lot of us want, right? So this concept of enough is something that we can get to when we're in a quiet place, a quiet space in our minds, right? We can't get to enough if we're in the rat race, right? If we're like rushing and like trying to like think ourselves out of our problems. enough and plenty happens when we're quiet. And so that's my first invitation is to say to you that you know, like, one thing about the scarcity mindset is actually being on the treadmill in our minds and not really taking the time to actually be able to sit, take stock of what we actually have, and know that what we have is enough, no matter what the media is telling us. Because yes, inflation, all that stuff, that may be happening, but we're living day to day to day, and we're doing great. We really are, right? So if we can get out of our heads about scarcity and the fear that comes along with that, we find out that we're fine, that we have plenty. So I just want to stop for a second and just see if there are any comments or questions in the chat, because I haven't had a chance to check. Meditation. Yes. Meditation is a great way to practice being in that quiet space, right? So you can, and that is a way that people do, like, connect to the abundance that exists, right, in the world, is through meditation. And part of abundance, part of plenty and enough, part of that is the way we feel when we are thinking about that. And part of that is when you're meditating, you feel peace, you feel calm, you want for nothing. When we want for nothing, that's another way of saying we have enough, right? So meditation is definitely a great way to do that and get more expansive. And that's what part of what this conversation is about expanding out of scarcity mindset, which is a fear mentality, into seeing more possibilities. So yes, that's great. Decluttering. Yes, decluttering is, I mean, it's amazing, right? Like we can live in survival mode and feel like we don't have enough, but actually we have too much. You know, we collect stuff to feel better, and then physical space also opens us up so that we can feel unburdened, for sure. Let's see what else here. Yeah, guilty for relaxing. You know, that's definitely something that we have a lot of, right? It's like, again, I'm never doing enough. I feel guilty for relaxing, but relaxing is when we can get to that place of peace, abundance, and ease. All right, fantastic. So I'm going to go on to the next bit, which is about how, you know, the scarcity mindset really affects our nervous system, because it feeds into the stress response, right? And the stress response is a brilliant design. You know, the design of the stress response is to keep us alive, to keep us safe. And it's basically though designed for brief periods of time when we need to get away from danger, you know? So, and most of you probably know something about it. It's like when the stress response is triggered, adrenaline, cortisol, and glucose shoot through our bloodstreams, right? In order to give us the energy to go or fight, you know, flee or fight. And that's genius, right? It's, you know, there's this woolly mammoth coming at us, we're out of here, you know? Or, you know, in modern times, let's say someone's chasing you with a knife down a dark alley. Okay, you're gonna get away from that. Or, you know, you've all heard the stories of the mother who picks up the car and lifts it off of her baby, you know, who's trapped under the car. Those are the amazing, you know, that's what the amazing stress response can do. It could give us superhuman strength when we need it. The thing about it, though, is it's designed to trigger for both actual threats. So someone's chasing you down the dark alley, like you can see the person, they're right there, or perceived threats. So when we were in the savannah or the jungle or whatever, you know, it's like, well, you hear the rustle in the bushes, it could be a woolly mammoth. So your stress response triggers a little bit. But then you turn around and you see it's not a woolly mammoth, it's just a small animal, it's not going to hurt you. And you can calm down again. So perceived threats, it's important to just, make sure that we're like, okay. The problem with that, though, is that in modern times, the number of perceived threats that we have is kind of endless. We have bills we have to pay. We have demands at work. We have deadlines. And if you want to think about what are the ones that are most linked to survival, it would be bills to pay, it would be debt, it would be things that you think are going to lead to the worst consequences. Or it's, if you feel like at work you have to perform a certain way or you'll get fired, then that's also linked to a kind of potential catastrophe, right? So the catastrophe hasn't happened, but you're living in a state of preparation, or you're kind of always on alert for this catastrophe to happen. So we end up swimming in these perceived threats. And the thing about it, though, is that, the stress response that means is kind of on all the time. And that's not how it was designed, right? It was designed for brief periods of time, but because we now have all of these perceived threats, including, again, the war in Russia, the energy crisis, like perceived threats, the people on Twitter who are yelling, about the democracy, is falling down or whatever, it's like perceived threats everywhere. So we're all sort of living in this moderate or low grade to moderate chronic stress situation all the time. And what that does is that makes it harder to function in any area of our lives, including work. But it makes it harder for us to get to access that calm, which is where we're able to find, again, peace, ease, plenty, enough, all those feelings that make us feel okay. The more if our baseline is, moderate stress most of the time, then it's definitely, it's harder to find abundance. It's harder to find peace. One, I'd say, like, if you want to look at an example of a perceived stress, perceived threat in action, as we probably used to do it thousands of years ago. If you have a cat or you have been around cats, like a cat will be completely relaxed, but then their ears will perk up because they'll hear something, right? But as soon as they identify that it's not an actual threat, they just curl up. They curl up again. They completely relax again. And that's how it's designed. You check the perceived threat, then you go back to relaxation. So cats meditate a lot. I'm sure you all know. And that's why they're so zen, right? But they're good models, really, because they teach us how, we don't need to worry about all these things all the time. Just go back and take your nap. Everything's okay. Everything is fine. So that's just like a little bit about like how those things interact. And, you might say, well, aren't these all actual threats, though, really? Because if I don't pay my bills, if I don't do what the boss says, yada, yada, yada. No, they're perceived threats. And the reason I say that is because, coming back to, again, how are you doing in the present? The present is the only place we live, right? The perceived threats are in the future. They're tied to some future fear. So the more that we can actually come back to, I'm okay right here, right now, and ground ourselves in the physical present with breath, with feet on the floor, with doing a meditation, or with, again, sort of taking stock of everything you have, like, it helps us practice this sense of everything is okay. I'm okay. The world is okay. I mean, there are problems, but I don't have to fix them right now. And I can't be thinking about all of them at once, because that's just burning me out. So that's just more about, how we can sort of, the importance of, and, people talk about presence a lot. That's, it's almost become, especially with talk about mindfulness and meditation and things like that. but it's almost like sometimes we can give it lip service. Yeah, of course, I need to be present. But truly, in the present, when we're not trying to plan for the future, we're not thinking about what happened, that is when we get our best ideas. We don't get our best ideas trying to plan for some future worst case scenario. We get our best ideas the more present we are, the more present, open, and as Danielle was talking about, expansive. Then we're not in this tunnel vision of fight flight. We're in openness. We're able to see more opportunities. We're able to see more creative solutions. And that's from being right here, right now, not trying to hold too many things in our heads at once. I just want to take one. I see we're like about a half hour in. I want to make sure that I'm answering these questions. Yes, we can choose what we focus on. It's very important. And that is a big part of this, right? When we're in the habit of focusing on certain things, such as, again, the scarcity or the problems we have to solve, there's a big piece of this, and this is the next piece I'm going to jump into, which is about trusting our resilience. And this is where it really all comes down to. It's about trusting our resilience, and our resilience is online in the presence. It is less online when we're worrying about future scenarios or when we are, worrying about our survival. The thing is, when you think about resilience, we all have resilience, right? We all are innately resilient. We all have innate well-being. We all have innate joy. And in fact, those are really our default settings until we start getting ourselves kind of caught up in rapid, kind of feedback loops about what we're afraid of or what we're trying to avoid. When we're in the present in a calm state, our resilience is online. So if you do have a problem, a pressing matter that needs to be dealt with, you're going to be thinking more clearly. You're going to be, and back to the question about focus, which, someone brought up earlier, it's like you're going to be more focused the more time you spend in the present, more of the time. And that means, again, allowing yourself that time to relax. You may not feel like you have it, but that's counterintuitive. If you give it to yourself, if you, you're going to have more time because it's all about perception. So the more we perceive, the more we, let's say practice leaning into quiet space. It doesn't have to be a lot of space, by the way. You can give yourself a 5-minute meditation in the middle of the day. And if you really use that 5 minutes to bring yourself, to the here and now, it's going to fill you up and it's going to give you a lot more bandwidth than if you just keep going. So the coming back to this idea of natural resilience, we're all very resilient, and we've all, we would not have gotten this far in life were we not, right? And we're all very resourceful. We have, necessity is a mother of invention. If we are pressed against a wall, we'll find a way, and that's true. And the more that we give ourselves space and bandwidth, the more we offer ourselves that, the more resourceful we will even be, the more expansive and the more possibilities that show up. So I think, we don't hear this in our culture much, that you're innately resilient, that you don't have to work so hard, that being who you are, showing up is enough. Like if you show up, and this kind of ties in with the quiet quitting thing, like if you show up and you do what needs to be done without all the added stress and pressure, that's enough. That's more than enough. That's plenty. And a lot of us, have gotten, another message that comes in is about excellence and, above and beyond and all those things. Well, I say excellence is showing up quality as a, in a quality way, meaning like present, centered, clear, focused, that's excellence. Above and beyond and hustle and all that, that's going to be exhaustion. So there's a way in which we can start to switch our minds from feeling like this is needed from us. We need to be frantic and frenetic all the time, into tapping into what is our true innate resilience, which is present within us all the time. And it shows up more when our mind is quiet, when we slow down. And there's so much more energy we get out of that than we get from trying to force things and push things and, check everything off the list. The resilience that we have is there all the time. We don't need anything beyond that. Like we have everything we need in the moment. And that's what, the more we can trust that, the more we can trust that we have everything we need. We don't need to try so hard, push so hard, struggle so much. There's a piece here, and this I'll wrap up with this piece, which is about trusting in life too. Like we can trust our own resilience. Like if you actually started to do a resilience log for yourself, like looking at your whole life and how you have managed difficult situations and how you've come out of them stronger and what you learned from them and all of that, you'd start to see just how resilient you are, and that you don't need to be afraid or worried or stressed out about anything. If your worst case scenario happens, you will handle it, and you will handle it well, with grace. And that's really all you need to know. And that life actually has your back. So many times when I've heard stories of people's worst case scenarios coming true, suddenly the fear disappeared. They got fired and they were like, oh, okay, well, now I have to look for another job. All right. So it's almost like it becomes like not a big deal in a way, or a lot of the worries and the fears clear away because it's all okay. Life has your back. You're going to be okay. You know what to do. So if we can, it's like lift the burdens off of ourselves, like let go of the burdens that we put on ourselves. It's going to make it so much easier for us to find the new opportunities, for us to see that we have enough, we are okay. We don't need to be living in this fight flight mode all the time. It's optional. It's optional. So that's just this is the basic, little offering I wanted to give you today. And I do want to open this up to live questions in a minute. I'm also going to look at the chat and see if I missed anything there. In fact, let me look at the chat now and just see if there's anything that I missed. And if I do miss something in the chat, you can bring it up in the live questions, because I'm happy to answer those. Yeah. Right. Santa says, looking in the past and realizing everything you've dealt with, tougher things than you can imagine. And so, you can deal with whatever happens. And that's something we can rely on. We can rely on our own resilience, our own creativity in the moment, our own, we come up with the solutions that we need to. And so we don't need to be trying to plan for or prepare for all these other things. Great. All right. So, and right before we get into the Q&A, I just wanted to, these themes are some of the themes that we're going to be talking about in the program that I'm doing called the Work-Life Playbook. And it is about how to create a life you don't need a vacation from, right? So, if we're always like living on this hamster wheel and we're like, oh, when do I get a break? It's like, we can't be living for our vacations. What if you didn't need a vacation? And it's on themes like this, but we also talk about more specific things such as, focus, procrastination, time management, goals, things like that, and different ways to look at these things that may stress us out. Because, most people come into the work world or living in work environments right now that do stress them out. And each one of you has, different versions of that, like different things that you get stressed out about, whether it's from, around survival mode and you're, feeling like you're always trying to make ends meet, or whether it's trying to get to the next goalpost, or whether it's just trying to cover all the bases during the week. There are different ways, to look at those, to different perspective shifts that can make a huge difference in how you live your life, and how you show up to work, and giving that sort of quality performance versus feeling like you have to do everything or satisfy impossible demands, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a little bit about the work-life playbook. It's a really great way to sort of take a deep dive into this, to kind of get out of that survival mode, and who knows, like what might open up out of it. For some people, it's a new career altogether. For other people, it's just finding a better way to work in the work environment that they're in currently. So that's a bit about that. And Nicole's going to put the link, and she has put the link in the link to that in the chat in case you want to check that out. And now we are going to unmute, and I'm going to see if anybody has any questions or comments or anything. All right. Well, if no one has a question, I would just want to appreciate and thank you so much for taking your time to show up. And you can also feel free to, the link will lead you to my website, where you can contact me if you have any further questions at any point about anything. I do offer also one-on-one coaching, and I'm going to be doing more of these things over time, just to kind of, see if I can help people out during the week, drop in, have a chat, see what I might be able to offer. So, oh, and there's my email is actually in the chat now, if you ever have any questions for me at any point. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. It was really wonderful to have you here. And I really hope I hope you take away some good nuggets. And I also hope that you have a really wonderful rest of your day.